before I hit the button. Right.
That's fine.
Okay. I think we're still tells me setting up, but okay. We're really live now. All right. So let's build an agenda. All right. I don't know, not too much to talk about, probably that's urgent that I can think of, but we could talk about the Weaver, some of the stuff that I've been thinking about there. I see if I can figure out how to digest, boil down what I've been thinking of into a question. In terms of other things that I've been doing, maybe there's some form fixer stuff we could talk about. Any open PRs that were maybe good to check in on? Michelle, I saw you had a question. I think we're still like, I have total consensus yet on one of the PRs maybe.
Well, Bryce and I had a conversation that I meant to transfer over there.
Okay.
Just that we will make the ID, we will put the actual ID on the container and then put the kind of JavaScript, a CSS ID on the accessibility ID. We will adjust that one to add _content. And then in future, if it does turn out that we need a way for people to customize their ID, it'll be easy to move over to that methodology.
Okay, I think that makes sense. Yeah, whenever we're like trading a lot of complexity upfront for future flexibility, it has a cost too. So I think that's good. I'm glad we're able to get to that resolution. I'll just note that down here. That's our first one. Is it a class or an ID?
It's just it's an ID, a CSS ID.
All right. Anything else that anyone can think of for us to put on our discussion list? Price, any like of the e-filing stuff that's worth us giving some thoughts on?
I mean, I don't really think so.
Okay. I guess we could talk about Opens Online stuff. Maybe people have some ideas there. I guess it's okay if we don't use all of our time. Usually it's pretty rare that we don't have anything to say. But all right. I'll show you what I've been working on for the Weaver since nobody else has anything to discuss. But if it reminds someone of someone, I'm happy to pivot because it doesn't necessarily need a lot of discussion. So one of the first things I was doing is I was looking at this and I was like, it's a bit of a side project from what I was directly doing, which is trying to integrate I'm Feeling Lucky. But I did go back to turning back on the auto field detection feature. And I think this makes sense. The place where I'm putting it is after you've uploaded a form. So instead of it being a checkbox on this screen here, it's something that's offered only if you upload a form with no fields like this one here. which works pretty well.
Hmm,
I think this
I
makes sense.
see.
And a lot easier for it to be its own screen that pops up, I think.
Yeah, makes a lot more sense.
I think it makes it less discoverable. So, but that can be a plus as well as a minus, right? If
Well,
this is
because-
something.
It's a feature
Yeah.
that you really, yeah,
I think it's a plus in this case because the entire reason why we like weren't sure about it and like it confused a lot of people is because it was like there's too much and most people won't need it at that point. And there's better ways we can like integrate these sorts of things anyway. So
yeah.
Okay.
So this is one that I haven't figured out yet. I was trying to figure out. So you only really need to auto detect fields if there are no fields. So I think it's discoverable at the right time.
Okay.
Anyway, if that makes sense. This is only about discovering the fields for an unlabeled PDF. The renaming fields automatically feature, I think we could integrate that in a different place that's still discoverable in context, but something to consider whether we need that to be part of the Weaver or not, because it doesn't perform that well, like not necessarily like a net benefit to have to use our auto field labeling right now. But I think maybe the stuff once David pivots to doing it, integrating with Chat GPT or GPT-3 anyway, I think we might suddenly get it to perform a lot better. So here's where this screen is not supposed to come up in this order. I'm continuing on to show you where the I'm feeling lucky button is supposed to show up.
Okay.
It, for some reason, is triggering that screen in order for me to show the country and state. So I was thinking through, like, what is
that screen because it needs the name, doesn't it? Like civil document statement.
No, it's actually needing it because it needs the definition of the state, default state, which I have set in another code block. I think I have to just make sure I'm triggering the order of the questions correctly. And use interview.state to be defined, which I have defined in a code block. Well, no, that's not right. I think I might just need to move around the order of the blocks. Interview.state is defined on this screen too. So I might be really simple to figure out because I could just make this always be a screen that shows up right at the beginning. And this is not meant to be a drop down to be radio buttons. And this is supposed to be responsive. But this is my thought. I'm like, okay, if you want to go through and use I'm feeling lucky, are there a minimum number of things we want you to say about the form before we let the computer do the rest of the work? And I was thinking saying the jurisdiction of the form is one of those things, because I don't know any way to auto detect jurisdiction from the form. I guess we could try to build our own model. We do have all these forms from different states. I just don't know how helpful that is.
But what
People.
does the state have to do with the labels that are being created? Like, why is it important to know before creating the labels?
It is a thing. It's a thing that we taken in the form fixer. I'm with Michelle though. I don't know why it's in the form fixer. I guess like David's model kind of does stuff with it. I can't imagine it being
It's not a very strong
actually
signal.
useful though. Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe I just take it out. It's one of the parameters. I was looking through the parameters of our current interface to the I'm feeling lucky feature, but you're right. Maybe it just doesn't belong here at all. I was just experimenting with doing it literally, and this conversation is convincing me maybe I shouldn't. All right.
It's definitely a thing that I feel like had carryover from all of the other like models that we've had, but I still just, yeah, it doesn't really make a ton of sense that labeling should depend on the jurisdiction.
Do you think there's anything that should, well, it's not really labeling that it matters. It's like how is the draft going to have the right stuff in it? Ultimately, people do want to have a form that out of the box has the right jurisdiction, but maybe it should be more prominent on the review screen rather than something we ask before they run I'm feeling lucky, because it's not something that changes how I'm feeling lucky works.
Yes. That's, yeah, I think we're in agreement there.
Okay. The other question, is there any other signals we should ask that maybe we do want to use before I'm feeling lucky runs? Let me pull up the code.
Are we thinking blue sky here? Because jurisdiction is like one of the other things that we actually use in the model for labeling stuff.
It is part of the labeling model,
Well,
or you're saying
I'm
it
saying
is,
it's,
but probably doesn't help that much.
yes, if it is, I think it is maybe part of the model. I actually am now I'm questioning whether how deep in the model it is, or if it's just something that needs to get set. It might be in the model, but I can't imagine it actually doing a lot. Like if we set it to a dummy variable of like Massachusetts every time, does it actually give us different labelings? No.
I think it's just you can set it to none and it will still do its thing.
Okay. That's fair.
But maybe
yeah.
it's set to default to Massachusetts, so maybe I'm wrong about none being a real choice.
I think
thing
it
I-
does default to Mass. Oh, does it default to Massachusetts?
You might not have seen this code, Michelle, because it's really just for the I'm feeling lucky button we're talking about.
Okay.
And
Yeah.
that was the only way you
This
could get
might
it
come
for
in.
was from the Form Explorer until I finished this code.
Oh, okay, got it.
The other things I was saying is I don't like what else is
Here
like,
are
are we talking about other things that the form fixer can take for like input there? Or are we thinking just anything and we'll try and find a way to add it to the model for the form fixer stuff?
the question is like what
Basing the
from a
question.
user experience point of view, like what questions are good to ask there before you run the auto generate interview feature? And maybe I was thinking it was more things like what kind of form is this, but maybe we can do a good job detecting that. Like in terms of the category of, is this a letter? Is this a court form? Is it a, that big broad category of the kind of form?
I think my thing is that if it's not anything that we're actually using for like I'm feeling lucky, I don't think we need to put it before it. Like
Show it after, let people
Yeah.
refine it after.
Do they get
But
to
we could
download the form?
Then
like-
take this and say, we're going to use it to change how I'm feeling lucky works, right? But especially because some of the stuff we're talking about improving its performance doesn't exist yet.
So, I mean, it should be easy to change afterwards if we do implement some stuff for I'm feeling lucky, right?
yeah, it's not. I don't feel like
We're not,
if we start doing more, taking in more information for that, we just move the question forward.
all right, I'm going to move out of the way. Hold on. All right, I'm going to pause my screen share and turn off my camera for a second. Sorry.
Okay. Bryce, do you know if they're able to just download the form, like after they generate the fields, can they just download, or do they have to go through the rest of the Weaver? Because that might just be useful to people if they can just download it right after just generating fields.
Well, we just have it as we're integrated into the rest of the Weaver. I don't think maybe we could eventually put it in like a dashboard thing. We have a ton of other stuff in the dashboard. This one
I'm
might
just
already
saying,
be.
when they get to that stage in the Weaver, can they say, can they click on it to download it? Are they
Yeah.
able to?
Like from that preview, probably, yeah.
Technically, yeah, okay.
Um,
Like it doesn't flatten it or anything.
What was the question? The question was about the like auto labeled PDF, whether you could download that.
Like just once when you first get to the screen after it's been generated, can you just download it right there? I was just curious.
Well, it has a watermark on it, so people don't do that with it right now, because it is really designed to just be for people using it when they hadn't already labeled it. But of course it's useful, but yeah, like Bryce said, it's part of the dashboard. So there's other ways to get to that picture.
So there's other ways to get to an auto-labeled PDF?
Yeah.
Maybe I misunderstood. Okay.
Yeah, the dashboard has like all of our kind of PDF tools are there in the dashboard right now. That's one of them.
Okay, I didn't know if that was a separate one. Cool.
Yeah, I think I'm really interested to see if like maybe I should reach out to Dorna and see if she wants to
We really should. If we want to do that, we really should, because we've been talking about it for a long time.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just trying to figure out, like, now that it's been very interesting to see like how well ChatGPT could help do a new thing to me. And I'm not so sure if starting with their code base has.
How's chat? Okay, maybe I jumped forward a bit. Okay, when you said talk to Dorna, you were talking about Gavel's like online labeling tool,
PDF.
right?
Yeah.
PDF labeling tool. How does ChatGPT help with where to put the fields in the PDF? It's not going to help with that.
I think it would help actually quite a lot. I mean, I'm just.
How is it? Well, it might help. I agree. It might help with like the labeling and stuff, but it's not going to help with where does this field show up in the PDF, and is it a drop down or like a radio button, right?
I'm talking about its ability to help us with a new coding task and figuring out which libraries to use and building it. So I'm like, do we want to stretch out our goodwill to ask them to donate code to us when maybe we could invest 30 hours and have something that's exactly what we want without having to. That might sound silly, but I'm just thinking, they're a commercial company. I don't know if they want to donate that to us or not. And then when we get it, how much work is it going to be to understand their code base and then get it to work the way we want? It's a non-trivial amount of time it would save us to do it. But ChatGPT levels the field a little bit to me in terms of how well it can help you with learning new libraries and getting up to speed up quickly. So whereas that seemed like a really daunting task like a few months ago, now I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I could help me learn. I know the tools we need. We need like Canvas and PDF.js. And now I feel like I have a way I could try to learn it if we wanted to. Does that make more sense?
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Sorry, I thought you were talking about using it directly to label things, because I know that's what we're looking to do for like the next steps for the Weaver. And so I thought you meant that sort of
different side of it, not using it to on each PDF, just using it to help with building a front end for labeling PDFs. That's
maybe you're more confident.
Not that well compared to what we want, right? So like the question is, does it save enough time to start with one of these?
Yeah.
You could also ask them to keep working on it, but it's like, I don't know where it is on their strategic roadmap. If their new PDF, if their new non-doc assemble based platform is going to rely on PDFs.
I don't think it is from what I've seen.
Oh, it won't?
Well, it still has some PDF stuff involved, but like, I don't think it's a strategic priority for them from what I've, like, there was, I think one of the podcasts that they've been on that like, where they talk about like moving from DocAssemble, they talked about it being like trying to move to a more like data oriented pipeline, which means like less putting things in PDFs and sending around the PDFs and more like, here's this database and you can access it from this other tool we have and sort of stuff like that. So
that makes sense.
I don't
if
think
the documents and abstraction they don't really need, then PDFs are even more a thing that they probably.
Yeah.
Because PDFs aren't that relevant to a lot of law firm kinds of document automation tasks that are starting with Word documents generally. And then if they're not even thinking that documents are central to what their work is, I would imagine PDFs are even way lower on their priority. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
I think I think that's like a minus point for asking them to keep supporting it, or like, hey, would y'all mind like updating XYZ about it? I feel that's a slight +1 for like, hey, do y'all want to open source this?
Right.
And or like move it under our stewardship under open source or whatever. The only thing I do know about it is it's part of it's Rails. I think at one point I was looking at like the console logs or like the source of the HTML, whatever, and something mentioned Rails in there, like Ruby on Rails. But I don't know how much of that is actually the hard hitting part of it. I feel like the hard hitting part is still mostly like the JS Canvas stuff. But all I have to say, I don't know. The only other thing I was gonna say, it's maybe worth considering doing our own. I feel like you are a bit more confident with the ChatGPT stuff than GPT stuff than I would be. I've used it before and I feel like it hasn't helped me a ton. But, and also I feel I'm still like hesitant for just like, it's a brand new thing. ChatGPT might help get some of the code there, but like polishing it off to actually be usable, like in like a few different ways, or just like not sort of like weirdly broken, is going to be more of a challenge. But
Yeah. Well, I guess the question is like a brand new greenfield project that we're going to start, which has its own risks, versus trying to learn Ruby on Rails, which I don't know. Everyone says Ruby on Rails is like known for being really easy.
yeah, I know a little bit of Ruby.
It
I've
is
like,
adding another like technology stack.
Yeah.
yeah, and I don't know how much of that technology stack is just the like, or how much of, that's what I said. I don't know how much of the Rails stuff is it's just, oh yeah, that's the page that like you upload the PDF and then it spits back this template, like with JavaScript stuffy that you do, or JavaScripty stuff that you do in it.
Because if it's all in JavaScript, then that doesn't really matter that it's Ruby in the back end, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Well, I guess it's worth asking.
Yeah, I don't know where
I guess it's necessarily a huge ask to say, hey, are you thinking of getting rid of this code base? Can we look at it? And then we could see with a more educated perspective if there's anything worth copying or if it should be started from scratch.
Yeah.
Because the main thing we want to do is integrate all of our Python code into supercharging what Gavel's PDF labeling tool does.
Yes. Yeah.
So like the main task is getting the Python stuff to work with it, and then changing some of their defaults, which just don't work for what we want.
And that's fair. I don't know. The only thing I can't really speak to is how much of the the only other thing I can't speak to is like how much of the strategic for like goodwill for us that uses, and if that's worth it. If we have other things that we might want to do with Gavel in the future or whatnot. Yeah, that's just a different thing that I cannot evaluate well.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it's like crucial for us to pin this down now. And I also am realizing this, this is all on a stream live forever question. Okay, but nothing like anything secret saying like, yeah, we have to see if we want to ask someone for that to share something. They don't have to. Whether we should try to do it ourselves. I know they got it up and running pretty quickly because it hasn't changed a lot from the first version of it.
Which is another reason I think it's not super strategically priority for them.
Yeah. All right. Well, no real decision needed there. This is part of just not having anything urgent to talk about today while we're going off of this tangent. That's okay.
I forgot about the display template before. That we need to make an issue or something about. I should have probably made it. About changing the way that the ID is. Well, I can do that when I don't know. We need to add base 64 encoding basically. The ID. I might be able to just squeeze that in with the rest of the changes.
Can you say it again, Michelle? What do you think?
Right, sure. The ID needs to be encoded in base 64.
Okay.
So you could have invalid characters.
Wait.
That's all.
Well, it's two things. It's so yeah. So this was expanding on the conversation Michelle and I had.
Okay.
It's two options. The first is that we need to do some sort of encoding of the variable name, because the one character that is invalid in HTML IDs is the space character. Like all other characters are valid, but spaces aren't. And templates can be like, it could be in a dictionary with a string key with a space in it. Is just like the trying to be comprehensive. It can be any valid Python expression, which is or any valid like Python like dictionary key access sort of thing, which could have a string with a variable or a space in it. So we need to do something with like the raw Python name. Currently, it is just taking anything that is not like upper or lowercase A through Z and 0 through 9 and just removing it, which works fine. There's
I
like
keep forgetting that part. Sorry about that.
well, no, but we talked about that too. Like that is an option. That's what it's currently doing, but that does not match what is happening in one other Docker symbol variable to ID conversions, and it's also not happening for other conversions. It's also not it's a different. We do it differently for like display template versus collapse template and the other approaches. And so I do think we want it to be uniform there, and since we wanted to be uniform there, and it is like the same idea of taking a Docker symbol variable and making it to a valid ID, we should just also be doing the same thing that like Kiln already does for a lot of the other Docker symbol IDs, and just doing base64 was, I think, the full ID. Does that sound right, Michelle? Did I summarize that correctly?
Yeah, and much more of it than I remembered, so that's great.
Okay.
Okay.
It's not crucial, so I don't know whether to put it in this PR or not, but something to consider.
This is a way to kind of clean up and synthesize the way it's happening right now in two different ways mostly, or is it a bug basically that exists that you could encounter but people haven't?
It shouldn't be a bug.
It's just a better way to do it. This is kind of more of an enhancement to code quality.
Yeah.
Code quality code quality kind of could maybe be a bug, but like it's one of those things that like we wouldn't expect someone to ever do, but people do silly things sometimes. So
yeah.
But I mean, we do sanitize it sufficiently, so it's not like
yes.
people are going to run into broken code.
Just and I guess there are strategies that have collisions if people have very similarly named things, but
that's the silly thing I was mentioning. I was like, yeah, we're sanitizing it correctly, but if someone did users dot like first name dot whatever in a template, and then they also had with no dots or no underscores like username all one word like one or something, then yeah, it has a conflict there, which is the silly part of like and also on the same screen is like they have these very similarly named templates on the exact same screen. It shouldn't ever really happen, but it could if someone's doing something silly, and it would be weird and confusing for it to break.
Yeah,
that would also break other parts.
Would be that they open both parts of the both templates open at once, basically. That's the big.
Yes, and it also just breaks some other. It would break any Kiln assumptions that we have, and it would. I think technically it's like not a valid HTML page, and so
if it has two IDs that are the same. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, I will say like.
Pretty minor. You're right.
It's good to be able to test this with Kiln, but it's like an arbitrary blob.
Yeah, the Kiln thing is not
too important to test this with Kiln to me, but.
This Kiln feature isn't even implemented, and it's likely not going to be well, so I do have a specific use case for it that already exists, which is Caroline's Alaska stuff, where she's using display templates, and she's using the text of the display templates to test that the right text appears, but if they translate it, they will no longer be able to use the text of the display templates. So,
so she wants to make sure that the translations.
I'm looking ahead. She hasn't talked about translation yet, but I'm looking ahead. You know, if she tests a different language, et cetera, then the tests will fail on that those specific pages because it won't find.
She's checking for certain text. Doesn't need to be because it's hidden. I guess that's why you can't detect the text that's hidden. So you need.
No, what I mean is that she has titles, right? Step 1, blah, blah, blah. So if that gets translated to Spanish, which I don't know what that would be, But if that gets translated to Spanish, then that text is no longer there. So if she had an ID to look for instead of a phrase to look for, right now she goes, I go through the interview answering these questions this way. On the final page, do these phrases exist? Step 1 says this, step 2, blah, blah, step 3, blah, blah. If instead of step 1, it says the Spanish for step 1, then the test will fail, right? If she tries to test the Spanish version, unless she builds new
And-
tests just for the
Sorry.
Spanish.
So just to be clear, the only reason why this won't work is because the hidden text is not something you can otherwise detect without interacting with this template.
No, that's not what I'm trying to say.
Well, I'm asking if that's true. Is it the case you can't detect the text in another way other than interacting with the template, collapse template feature?
She's not trying to detect hidden text.
I'm just not sure why it needs a feature to open the template then.
It doesn't need a feature to open the template. It would need a feature to detect this is separate from this is
It's not part of display template at all or collapse.
this is them setting an ID a custom ID, right?
So you're not trying to
Sorry,
detect
maybe I
the
got
text, it's
lost.
the container ID that you're trying to see is present or not present.
Yes, exactly.
And that's dynamic. It's not based on, okay.
So right now it's
Because there's
based,
show if logic or there's make a logic
no.
basically.
So Bryce,
I'm
is
just
there a
really
way
trying
you
to figure
can-
out like why is this a feature that has to go into collapse or display template versus just general features of being able to detect the text that's on the page. So that's what I'm trying to narrow in on. It's not too
So
important enough to fix all of it.
phrase specific text is not language agnostic. So so we try and provide ways to do language agnostic things. If we could use the ID, then there could be a way to do what Caroline is trying to do in a language agnostic way. That's all.
So you need to know the ID so it's consistent. Doesn't really matter how we generate the ID though. I'm assuming just that you know what it is and you can
Yes.
detect it.
Yes. I wasn't sure how this tied into the encoding. So I'm just trying to describe the situation.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so
I think it ties into the encoding because we need to use the variable and not text
Well, I have my own comments about using the variable name, but yes.
yeah, to me this was like this feature. It's funny how you get like path dependencies. It's just like a little convenience wrapper in Bootstrap. So the more like complicated we make it to use and everything.
Yep, but
starts to feel like
this
it might-
particular change shouldn't complicate.
Yeah, I guess not. I mean, it's just
I mean, this one that
So-
we're proposing to make right now, we're not adding a custom ID right now. That's the decision. Is to
Right.
avoid adding a custom ID right now.
all right. So let's just think through what happens if we base 64 encode the ID. All of the ways that you use it with collapse template and display template are handled by our Python function.
Yes.
So it doesn't really matter that it's not a human readable ID anymore, I guess.
Nope. HTML IDs have never needed to be readable IDs. So
Yeah. And in DocAssemble, people are already used to lots of ugly base 64 encoded IDs everywhere. So
exactly. That's
I
the
guess
other part.
it's fine. And honestly, it's like, relatively simple block of HTML. They could, if they don't like our way of doing it, they can do it their own way. So, all right, I guess that's fine. If that's the simplest way to do it, to make it perform better, that's fine. I like things to be easy to read, but as that's not necessarily always the right trade-off.
Yeah. And
If you
there
think you
was
can put it in
something
here
Bryce
and
I
it doesn't slow
discussed.
you down, I think that's fine. But this
I might
this
just-
PR is
I might
definitely
just-
growing quite a lot in scope, considering what the original description of it was. But that's fine.
But I mean, as you just said, I may just make an issue and
Okay.
Finish out this PR the way it's planned. Bryce and I also discussed something about customization, why that would force something would force people to customize it, but I don't remember that part. Very
That
cool.
part was, so that part was an argument against like having a manually specified ID through a parameter, is because say if you're using a template on like in a library question, like something in the base questions library, to change that ID, if someone wanted to change that ID, they would have to copy their own
Right.
question and like write their own ID. Because I don't think we would be using like our default. We would not have a default ID name for those sort of things. The basic questions library. I think.
Right, right.
And so if they want to have their own ID, they have to copy the whole question out, which is just a thing that I'm not a huge fan of in DocAssemble of like, oh, you want to override one small thing about this question, copy the whole question out and like use it instead. It sort of defeats the main purpose of us having a base questions library that like people are using from, because the more people copy questions out, the less useful the base questions library becomes.
Yeah.
So
Unless you think of it as like, hey, we're just providing a skeleton to build on, which is how a lot of systems work. But yeah, it is still is a problem. I mean, maybe that's the kind of thing. Maybe we should save the day for like brainstorming some of the features in the playground that align with what we were basically. I don't remember, Michelle, if you were part of this discussion. It might have been one that David, Bryce, and I had a while ago. We were like, what's the right roadmap for the Weaver? Like, what do we want it to be able to do?
Yeah,
Also,
I don't
is
think
it-
I was there for that one.
It
That one was,
basically, like we landed on like, we think the Weaver, well, at least where I landed personally was my goal is for the Weaver to be equivalent of feature parity with Google Forms and Microsoft Forms. And then we were like, well, the real barrier that people have with coding in DocAssemble is not tied to getting the first draft of an interview. It's like that's then that you're in the playground and you're kind of stuck, right? So some of the ways if we could integrate our question library into the playground better, like clicking a button instead of having it be you then have to customize all the text, but then it's pops up a dialog box and you customize it there in place and inserts the right thing for you. Those were some of the features that you were thinking of, right, Bryce? That kind of.
yeah, like that sort of thing of like, my thing is like, there's a whole lot of implicit things in DocAssemble with like YAML syntax that is like, you have to use it, but you don't know you have to use it until you look up the documentation, and like the just typing text into a screen is fine for developers. I won't even say it's great for developers, but it's like developers can do it, but if you're not, it's just confusing, and there's no reason for it to be that confusing. It should be like, you have a DocAssemble question, like, or you have a DocAssemble block. Is this a code block or a question block? Like, how do you want to trigger it? Event, like variable name. And like, these can be like things that could be sort of like an options menu or like a way to select that sort of thing. And then we were talking about this, and it's like all of these things are fairly lightweight of a fairly lightweight like UI benefit on top of what you already get in the playground. But we could always have like a look at the raw code button that would switch you right back to like what the playground looks like now, and you can type the code as wanted as it is right now, and then you can always switch back.
We're
And we
talking
really
about
want this to be
making,
a progressive enhancement, like where no matter what, like we don't want to basically make a GUI that hides the feature and power of DocAssemble. We want to let the easy parts be easy.
Yes.
That are from our list of the 10 most common things you do. Have a menu without stopping you from being able to code.
are we talking about changing the playground? Because we
Yes.
switched
Yes.
over at some point and I,
2 parts.
okay, so I missed some of the
Convergent.
bits because I
Make it
was
easy.
thinking on a different track, but
Yeah. I mean, it's
Okay.
easier for us to think of ways to enhance the Weaver because it's the code we fully control. But the other part of this is
I mean,
enhancing the playground.
the other thing this makes me think of is, code hints, not code hints, code hints. Like
I know what you
in
mean.
a lot of
IDEs and stuff.
editors,
Yeah.
in a lot of editors, you hover over a function and it'll tell you the signature and it'll tell you what it does. And if we built something that you could hover over and it described what was going on, that could be a useful thing for people in general. I think it wouldn't help with the discoverability. It would help with if they took a Weaver, if they took Weaver generated code, then they would be able to discover features through that examination that they would not have otherwise been able to find. So in combination, it would provide both discoverability and.
You're talking about type sense, Michelle? Is that
I think so. I can't remember the word for it right
I don't
now.
think it's types in specifically. It's just like defunct like definitions and stuff. I don't remember that. Yeah, I don't know if there's a formal name for it, but it's just sort of like what you get when you use an IDE is what I'm understanding you saying.
Well, it
As like,
didn't used to be. You don't get it in Sublime Text, for example. But
well, that's not an IDE though. Like there's IDEs are like
yeah.
Eclipse or like forgetting the IntelliJ, like sort of stuff like that, where they're a lot heavier weight and they're actually parsing and understanding the code that you have on your screen and then saying, hey, you have a function definition. It's over here. You can jump to it immediately. Or like
But it wouldn't have to be that heavy. It could just be, you know, the docassemble keywords. It wouldn't have to parse people's actual code necessarily. I mean, that would be great and all, but that might be too heavy for what, you know.
I don't think that's that heavy.
think so?
Parsing's not that heavy. Like
Okay.
in terms of like it, like running, like runtime wise, it's not that heavy. It's more for us to do, I guess what you're saying, but
Yeah.
that's what I think that's like the full version of what you're talking about is like what you would get in an actual IDE if you had like first class support for like interviewing YAML files. And we can build up to that slope. We can like over time get like build, as long as we start doing a little bit of parsing and a little bit of stuff like this, it's not adding more things onto it is not as hard as just getting that initial thing into the playground.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of writing my notes, and some of them are things that we were just saying, some of the things I'm kind of thinking of before.
Yeah, sure.
One thing I looked up quite a while ago, like maybe a year or two, was there's a way like where DocAssemble's Playground uses CodeMirror as its editor.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't expose all of the features of CodeMirror at all. There's a lot more CodeMirror can do that it doesn't.
Well,
CodeMirror is crazy, yeah.
it's also very, very old, the version that we have on
Okay.
Yeah.
DocAssemble, and I've
probably
looked
good
into
reasons
getting
for
the new version, but
Well, anyway, you can also embed VS Code in the browser. So
I didn't know that.
it was something
Yeah,
that
I see you're talking about that sort of stuff.
was something I looked up 2 years ago. I'm guessing it's easier now.
Probably.
We'll see.
No, you don't
Yeah, it
think
might
they
not.
prioritize that? Okay.
It could be, it could not be. I don't know. It could be
Okay.
it could be they added a whole bunch of new features you can do with it that make like setup 2 times harder or something like that. Like
Fair enough.
I'm trying to think. I have seen pretty impressive stuff with CodeMirror before, but I don't know where I can find it.
Okay.
This is 2 years ago. Okay, it's Monaco.
No, it's Monaco VS Code.
Okay.
Why are people migrating from Monaco to CodeMirror?
Or at least that's a result that I've seen here.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just wondering.
Yeah, why would someone do that? Because you're saying CodeMirror seems to be pretty old.
Yeah, well,
CodeMirror,
it's probably grown a lot since I last tried to work with it. So
which is the red one. It looks like looks like slowly Monaco is taking over CodeMirror in this star history. Well, that's very arbitrary.
Highly skeptical of star history. Yeah.
Very much, starring is not a natural thing people automatically do in GitHub. So
yeah.
you have to kind of solicit stars, is my experience. Doesn't indicate people are using it, just indicates that they.
Like, yeah, it's like a specific type of person will star lots of things. And those aren't the same type of people who actually going through and using those repos.
Mm-hmm.
All right, this is basically saying, okay, it's hard to trim Monaco down, features you really need. Doesn't have good documentation. Well, that's not good. Several
was this
instances on
written?
one page would not be relevant. This is interesting. I would imagine that this was written about a year ago, not quite even a year ago, 6 months ago, 8 months, whatever. I'm surprised people are switching to CodeMirror. They're like, they just discovered CodeMirror, which is like a
Yeah.
15-year-old editor. And Monaco has to be
All
pretty
the
new.
same. Yeah.
CodeMirror 6 is a newer thing that like maybe suddenly added a bunch of stuff.
They were comparing it to CodeMirror 5 for what it's worth.
Mm-hmm.
These are pretty old results here. Well, 2021 is old. So in my head, the limitations of DocAssemble's Playground Editor are from CodeMirror, but it could very much just be a matter of updating to a newer version and using the features and exposing them properly. But I know VS Code on the desktop is very powerful. So I just kind of imagine here's someone doing the opposite thing. CodeMirror 2 Monaco. I mean, I like having one paradigm to use, one set of keyboard shortcuts. There's obviously a huge plugin base for VS Code. Guessing it's way larger than CodeMirror because CodeMirror is just the plugins would only be relevant to people who are deploying things like REPL.it and whatever this Play Canvas thing is.
And Chrome developer tools and stuff. Yeah.
Can you use VS plugins? Monaco, let's see. It says it's not possible. This was from 2017. Let's see if it got resolved. No, they just closed it. So
As Microsoft does.
what was it? Sorry.
I was just like saying, as Microsoft, as like I feel like all the big orgs just close their issues and never visit them again.
They might even have like a chore that does it automatically, though, to be fair. If they don't get acted on in a while. I mean, having a bunch of stale issues, great.
Yeah, sure.
I wouldn't want to have to figure out if a 6-year-old issue is still relevant.
Gotta do what you gotta do for your mental health, you know? Those dangling issues can be harsh.
Well, I can't imagine it's going to be easier to switch to a new editor than it is to like upgrade the version of CodeMirror and see if we can configure it despite the temptation.
Well, it might be a lot of work either way, honestly. So if we want to put a little bit of extra time into figuring out if Monaco is the better way to go, then it might be worth it.
Monaco is a lot lighter weight. I never actually haven't ever actually looked at the documentation or anything for it. It is a lot lighter weight. It's not just like VS Code in the browser. It's like the editor for VS Code in the browser, which is good, but like it is one of those, I think that issue with the plugins is relevant because it's just a completely different thing.
Back when I was playing with CodeMirror, it was just an editor in the browser too. So I don't know.
Yeah, which is fair. Like that's what we're gonna end up getting is an editor in the browser. I don't think we're gonna get like a IDE in the browser out of the box.
Mm.
So whenever we think of these features, basically what I'm wondering is like, right, like, so one of the features would be click an insert button, up pops a dialog, and then you customize some fields. It's like a little mini interview. Well, it's a form about the thing you're about to insert.
Yeah.
I guess that doesn't really care about what the editor is. As long as you can insert string where you want it to go, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's going to be stuff that we'll have to write anyway. So
And there probably aren't any really super helpful features in whatever editor we use to do that, no matter what either. Some of the like biggest pet peeves that I have are the broken search and the fact there's no cross file search. I think that could just be a better configured.
Broken search is definitely like a bug thing. Cross file searches would be killer though, and that's a good thing to look into, I guess. Yeah.
I believe
Broken search would be fixed with an upgrade. I looked up the issue and we just need a newer version of CodeMirror.
Do you know how old the version of CodeMirror is in DocAssembly?
It's super old.
Yeah, it's super old
It was
because
like
it's completely.
version 2 or version 3 or something like that.
Hmm.
Might have been older.
And check it really quick. It's like just entire sources is in DocAssemble.
Which is, it works, so. But
Okay. I mean, the DocAssemble playground, I wouldn't really say that it works super great. That's not. I would not say there's real danger in breaking.
Jonathan updated it.
Closed by the broken things.
It's now 5.65.11 is the code for version, and he updated it. Looks like 3 months ago.
Its
What was it?
CodeMirror is now
5.what?
5.6.11?
5.65.11. Yeah, 3 months ago, Jonathan made a big
Holy moly.
change, updated code stuff.
Maybe it was kind of hard to trigger that bug. So maybe that bug is fixed.
Yeah. I will say I've been surprised a number of times searching through stuff with students where it just worked and I was like, huh.
I never ran into it that often, but I do know I definitely saw that issue.
I ran into it all the freaking time. For whatever reason, my system was not playing nice with it.
Which is really weird because you wouldn't think it would depend on that at all. But yeah, I do know other people were. Well, this just says version 5. Let's see what the newest thing is. SQP GitHub.
6.1. I don't
Well,
know. Yeah.
if we're on version
Probably have
5, we
version
can
5.
probably start adding some like plugins in. Oh, it has tons of people who develop stuff for it. I don't know about Monaco, but I know that
Oh.
CodeMirror has a lot of people who've developed plugins.
Pretty.
We are
close.
only one patch mode behind, or one
Wow.
patch behind. It's
Two
5.65.
patches. Two patches. But yeah.
CodeMirror. There's a CodeMirror 5 repo on GitHub, and that's 5.65.12.
Oh, interesting. This one says 1.3. Okay.
Yeah, just looking at the documentation page, Bryce. I don't know if you're seeing it on the screen, but
Oh no, I see
version
it.
6, I don't know what the differences are between version 6.
Oh, okay. I guess it's just not in the changelog. Typical devs not putting the latest version of the changelog.
Hmm. People
Maybe
seem to
they
like
don't
it.
make changelog entries for patches.
They do because 12 or 0.65.12 is in there. It's just the latest one is not in there.
Oh, I see. Yes, that makes sense.
I love this. Even the most minimal sliver of research would have told you that it's not. I mean, one thing that would be really nice is if there were better and more modular syntax highlighting, where we could say this is a code block, use Python syntax highlighting for it, not YAML syntax highlighting.
We can. I made a thing. I made a highlighter. We can add more rules to it. I just
Yeah, that was
never got around to adding rules to it. That's all.
is a hard coded thing that I know Michelle wrote.
Oh, okay. I never saw that. So that's something you had played around with using CodeMirror already?
I mean,
It's
code
in
used to be
DocAssemble.
code used to not be styled. Yeah, code in a code block used to not be styled as Python code.
Oh, it already is? I just never use it anymore. So, okay, this is Python syntax highlighting
It's-
here.
Yeah, it's minimal, but like it's there. It's
Okay.
that's the thing is
It
it's not as,
depends. It depends on your, like, if you want to get it to look fancier, we would have to like install or look different, the highlighting to look different. But it does have the Python tokens in there.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's all I really need. And I know that that's hard to do that kind of thing in Monaco. Or at least I know I looked at a thread a while ago trying to figure out, could we put in syntax highlighting for DocAssemble interviews in VS Code? And it seemed like the answer was no, you can't really have like major and minor editing easily. Like you'd have to rebuild the whole syntax highlighter. Oops.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
But
That
that
is
was a couple
definitely a
years
mark
ago.
against
I
it.
only looked into it briefly. I might have misunderstood.
Okay.
Understand
Sure,
what it
sure,
was.
sure.
I do remember thinking, oh, well, this is easy in things like Emacs that expect that to happen, but it's not part of the design philosophy of VS Code,
Okay,
so it's probably harder. There may be better workarounds now.
Okay.
Okay. I mean, this kind of means, I think, to me, like we should maybe put energy into upgrading to CodeMirror 6. And
Because it's going to be such a drastic change, you mean?
well, I don't know. I guess
I think
CodeMirror is the big change anyway, isn't it? So maybe Monaco's worth looking at too.
Yeah, I think it's still, I think it's probably still useful to like blue sky exactly what we think like a good experience in the playground would be, and try and nail down a few specific things, like few specific features that we would want for like an MVP of that for like the next version. And then from there we can say, oh, yes, we will need a better CodeMirror or like better Monaco thing with that. And so we can go in and look at CodeMirror 6 or versus Monaco with a very specific thing in mind that we want to make sure is supported. I think would be a better way of doing it than just trying to blindly choose based on like which one's easier or which one's like simpler to start with.
Okay.
No, for sure.
I kind of hear that, but I also feel that once we start tinkering around, we're going to find other things we want to do. So picking one that not necessarily is easier to start with, but that is more extensible in general. Not just that does the specific thing we want to do, but that is generally more extensible.
I mean, yeah.
I'd also be worth putting the calculation in for that, right?
No, I agree.
Okay.
My way of looking at it, that is specifically for like, if it doesn't look like there's any way to do this one thing in like Monaco or CodeMirror or whatever, then even if it's easier, then like it's not going to be what we want to do. So I'm mostly afraid of us like looking at a thing that might be slightly easier for us to start with and like maybe slightly more extensible, but it turns out the one of the two specific things we wanted to do in the playground that we thought would be very useful for people is like incredibly difficult to do and are the one thing we chose, or whichever one we chose. So
sure. Okay.
Yeah, I guess so. Figuring out what we want to do and is it even require a new code editor? That's obviously also a really good place to start. I mean, some of the things like cross-file search, which would be a huge addition to the playground, probably don't really need to be tied to the language server, right? Like you could just have a thing that scans files in the directory and gives you a results list. So it's not. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And it's just the UI to jump from file to file.
Yeah. Need to touch
I mean, if we want to be kind of to think about, I don't know, to give us a foundation of thinking about what we want to do in this vein, looking at existing things that various IDEs do could be really useful in, noting down that this one would be especially useful for doc assemble, or this would be crucial to the workflow we're thinking of, or.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think we should expand our scope beyond IDEs to look at what visual editors are doing generally that we like and don't like.
Yeah. I have like a personal list of these somewhere that I can, like, I don't know what the
Yeah.
best way to like make this would sort of be, or like to start a discussion on this would sort of be. That isn't just like us sitting, like spending an entire Monday session just doing brainstorming for that sort of stuff. Like,
That
if we
sounds
wanna-
great.
If we want to have, that sounds great, but I feel like we could, if we want to start setting up those sorts of things as a discussion, would it be a discussion, an issue? I don't really know how best to organize it quite yet.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. I mean, it feels like
Another mural.
Do we want to just have one-offs for that? Do we want to say, okay, we're going to put, like, we could use some of the GitHub features to organize discussions and tie it to the assembly line repo as being kind of our parent repo.
Yeah.
We could use a new tool where, like, okay, we're going to track our ideas here. For a while, we were using Trello, but that didn't last that long, and it doesn't. Like, basically, this would be like one card on that Trello board the way it was envisioned, and that seems too small to fit our discussion.
Yes. Yeah. No, I agree.
But I think this is a fine place for now. Just
Yeah.
keeping notes in here, I think, is probably
That's in here. Okay.
until we come up with something better. I think this will.
That's
This is very
There's also-
easy for us to track, right? We're not gonna lose it.
Yeah. There's also the question, the higher level question of like, do we want to get these merged upstream? How do we practically integrate these into DocAssemble? Like, do we need to try and make DocAssemble more flexible, or like, can we even do something as simple as just overriding the playground endpoint? I don't think we can. But like, how exactly would we want to go about
I think we'd want
developing this?
I think it would be a feature to build with Jonathan's blessing.
Yeah.
It would either be a fork of DocAssemble, or it would be replacing the playground. That's why I think that's the distinction. Like, what can we build up in the Weaver? Start there.
Yes. Yeah.
But some of the things might be small features, like, okay, click a button, have a dialog pop up that you can customize. That seems like it's a pretty small amount of code to add to the playground.
Mhm.
Letting people put in plugins for CodeMirror and listing them in the configuration file, global config, that doesn't seem like it's that big a feature, right? So once we know what we want to do, we can figure out, are these things that require big changes or small changes upstream?
That's fair. Okay.
Mm.
Okay, well, that's pretty much, I think this is worth us holding a day to discuss some time. We could try for next week if people want to, or we could do it some future date. We already got a lot of good ideas down, I think. But I think something we probably could hold 2 days. One is one day for thinking about the Weaver and features there to kind of maybe organize around a milestone push, and then another one for the harder set of changes to the playground, probably, right? Then,
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'd be okay just honestly doing those 2 days if we wanted to do like next week this time, just like be like, yeah, unless there's anything like urgent that needs to get merged really quickly, let's just spend the whole deep dive doing that and then have a week break so we can lower the backlog a bit if there's anything. And then the week after that, do the non-Weaver playground updates or like ideas. Does that sound good?
I might have something going on till 12 from 11 till 12 next week.
Okay.
But I can come in after that, or maybe I'll skip that for this week, for that week or something.
Let me just take a quick look and see.
We could always push things around. I think Quentin and I no longer have classes, which I know we're fairly constraining thing on Mondays for like us needing to be off at 12:30. And so if we wanted to be like, yeah, let's like do whatever we need to, whatever ever needs to from 11 to 12:30, and then at 12:30 hop on and do it for an hour and a half then, maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah,
it would work for me next week to just start later for the coding deep dive. So if we wanted to do that, would that accommodate you,
that
Michelle?
would work. Yeah, that would work for me.
Cool.
For some reason, my meetings are all set for the wrong time anyway. I
Oh,
don't know why.
I gotta go, but I'll see you next time.
Sounds good. See ya.
Sounds good. And let me see. I just wrote down some ideas, so maybe we should stop there. I don't know. For the port forms online, well, there's nothing urgent there. I'm gonna probably spend most of this week on the Weaver actually, but
If you have questions now, we can go over them now. But yeah, if it's one of those, you're going to start it, and we'll probably have more questions as you start popping on during whatever you're thinking in Teams, and I can try and chime in. There helps too.
I am just thinking it or organizing it in my head right now, and I think that
Yeah.
probably our idea of like polling servers to get a list of the interviews they have is a good one. Trying to think about like what do you want to use to distinguish between published interviews and interviews that should go on Court Forms Online, because those are not the same thing, because they serve that cost yet people. So we want to add like some kind of metadata that they always need to have to be available that way. We want to take a chance to, since it's going to require some differentiation anyway, just tell people create this. Well, I don't know what it would be, but maybe we could even have our own endpoint that people reach out to. That was kind of what Michael was starting to say last week, huh? Richter.
Yeah, that was what he said, of like to make his own listing. That's fair. I'm looking at list like JSON 1 right now, just to see like what we do get back by default. I do think we could add it to like metadata, but it would be just, you're right, it would be a thing we would need to add to every single bit of metadata. But I don't know what all of these are. I don't know what like status class is.
Which one are you looking at? Which server?
I'm looking at test right now.
Okay.
Yeah, I think I can just copy the link.
Here, let's do it here too.
Sorry, yeah. Yeah, so apps test.
That's a good one because it has a lot of stuff that's published.
Yes, yeah. And then list, yeah, one. There is a status class, which I don't know what it is.
Huh.
Or like where it's populated. Look at the document code.
I think that is probably to do with whether it's read or not.
Oh, you're right. Yes. Oh, yeah, I looked it up and immediately the first status class, one of the lines in the doc symbol code is status class equals DA interview has error. So you're right. That is what it is. Not quite what we would want to do that then.
The rest of these are like top level metadata keys.
Yes.
So metadata is the one we can customize. Just kind of not very performant, but that's okay, I guess.
Yeah.
Because honestly, we're talking about polling them when you regenerate the front page, which I guess we could set a task to do once a day. That's not really a big deal.
Yeah.
And if someone wanted to do an out of order release, you could do it manually. It's like, okay, check all of these servers one extra time. It's not that big, it's slow. It is really slow though, because I have to compile and run all those interviews.
Yeah.
One thing I'm noticing is we have all these little extra new lines. So whatever we do, we have to make sure to account for that. That's just because when you use the vertical pipe and then you have a block,
Oh, yeah,
YAML interprets that as keep the new line at the end of the block,
yes.
unless you put a hyphen after the vertical pipe,
Yeah, that's fair.
or if you use the angle bracket instead of the vertical pipe. Just Jonathan, I'm used to reading it that way because that's how all of the examples for DocAssemble are, but probably he could have chosen the angle bracket to start and I would have been used to that.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, it's just like, there's no clue here yet right now that these are assembly line interviews, but I guess
No.
there really shouldn't be.
we could easily add a thing though.
But
And I
it
think
wouldn't really be like, is this an assembly line interview that we'd want it to say there? It would be like, it would more be like, do you want this to go on a public index page or not?
yes,
So
yeah,
it shouldn't require them to use the assembly line to do that.
it could be something vague like share between servers. Not the right wording, exactly right wording, but like that's the idea of like, hey, I'm a server that's looking at this. Am I allowed to like have, like host a link to this other interview sort of thing? And
Yeah.
that would
Yeah,
be,
we definitely want to like have more stuff in here anyway. So having people customize it a bit is not a big deal.
yeah,
like
there are quite a few
description.
that have some of these have descriptions, but not all of them do. But I think a lot of the ones that do have descriptions would be like that would be the little tiny blurb that would go on the page, on the Quarters Online page, right?
Yeah, if we look back at that, exactly. And we want to rewrite these blurbs. They're not very
They're not
consistent,
very great. Yeah.
and they're not that good either. Both of those things are true.
Let's see. One is we have I'm trying to see if there's any that I can check, like what's the difference between what's in the description and the JSON versus what's on the actual forms online. Consumer debt. I don't know what kind of that would be.
Well, I'm sure these are really different.
Yeah.
So, like they're not. Yeah, I don't think they're the same at all, really. Because the description is something people only really did when they ran it through the Weaver when we added that field, which wasn't from the, I don't think it was from the very beginning. Maybe it was really early on though. And then the description for the site was when people edited the Google form, or not the Google form, but the Google Sheet. And that was something you did at the end of the project. Like I just can't imagine that very often those were the same.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's right.
And they didn't necessarily write that initial description thinking of it as this is going to be what it's going to say on the website.
Okay.
I think we probably could come up with some more metadata that we would want to go there. Now that I'm seeing what's on here, like sometimes it says what you need before you get started, and sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it says what the original form name is, and sometimes it doesn't.
Sometimes it says stuff about whether it's deliverable to that court or is national.
I think the jurisdiction is one for sure. Has e-filing enabled. Okay. All right, this is actually pretty good metadata we want.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it's one of those things that we just get list by default. But if we ever do start running performance things for these, it might just be easier to not. I don't know. I guess it still makes the most sense to have these contained in the metadata in the file if it's something we're trying, or metadata in the interview if it's something we're trying to associate with a specific like interview YAML specifically, right? Like there's not a better place to put it.
I can't think of a better place to put it really, because like these are all data that you could have in the interview too, like on the about page. There's lots of ways I could think of using these things.
Yeah.
Where there's value to having it be in one place and then having it be separately stored, even if we're only using it for the website. Okay, if you can get most of it from looking at the interview metadata, maybe it should just be everything, because then it's, you know exactly where to put it. You don't have to try to remember where that file is that you're editing manually alongside it.
Yeah. That's fair. I'm looking at other things. Maybe it is still useful to like, I don't know. I'm mostly realizing how little of a like we get some stuff just like out of the box with list.json, but like we're not getting everything. And there's already a ton. I'm realizing we have a ton of this stuff. Like we already asked people what the like if they have any specific like jurisdictions that this works in, doesn't work in.
Yeah,
It's just not in metadata, it's in interview metadata. It's like in our own little thing that we did so we can nest forms like this, still have access to other, like the metadata for other forms. And so maybe it just makes, and if we know these things, we can just hard code our stuff, or we can just have our own little list.json, could literally copy what it's currently doing and make our own Flask endpoint that like does the same search that Docker symbol is doing, but instead of like running it, we just do a quick scan of the YAML code and see, hey, is there a variable name? Like it's not gonna be perfect, and it's not gonna handle every way that you could have define it, but like there are like 3 ways that we define it in our interviews. It's either a code block that the first thing or the only thing it's doing is setting like interview metadata to like with some dictionary key to a new thing. It's using a variable name data block, or it's actually I think those are the only 2 things to do.
well, we could just do like a parse. Either if it's the YAML block, then we can parse it literally. But if it's not, we could execute the code block probably, right?
Yeah,
I think trying to parse or Python interpreters makes sense for that, but
no, yeah, we could probably get away with parsing the. Let me actually see now that I remember what it's.
yes, that does mean if someone installs a malicious package on the server, we're going to be executing the code, but that will happen anyway. So that Docker symbol works.
Oh yeah, that'll happen anyway.
They could run it on our server, I suppose. But that's.
Let's see. We have the new way of doing it. I'm trying to look for an old one. Yeah, we have. So yes, it's a mandatory. Sorry, I'm realizing I'm just doing this on the
You want to put a
Shinnigan. Yeah, I can.
Or you can screen share too.
I can just screen share too. So
Yeah.
this is the old way of doing it. Like we define interview metadata and then we just do interview metadata dot update. Like if we wanted to get away with not actually parsing Python, we could 100% do some really hacky stuff that's like, we know it's always going to be this. No one's ever changing how we're updating interview metadata. It's either this or it's the like data YAML block, which is the preferable way to do it. But like for the old versions, we could still assume it's exactly this. Like, is it a mandatory code block? If yes, find the line that is update and then just look at the dictionary of everything else that's in here.
So we should think about, that's an interesting idea to let us avoid having to rewrite some interviews probably. Right?
Yeah.
The question, but I think we probably do want to anyway for some things like the description. We want to use the description.
Yeah, this won't have better descriptions. So
yeah.
But this is, I think, the better place to put all of the extra, like, or we already have like housing court, like is where it is. I don't think don't directly have jurisdiction in here. But this makes the most makes the most sense of like, yeah, put this as a Massachusetts form, sort of thing, or it's a national form, like stuff we already have implicitly in the main thing. Yeah, I guess you're right though. We do have to update it. So maybe it's worth it when we update it. We just change these to the data blocks anyway, and then
changing the data blocks is something, but if we're going to have it be in the scanning the YAML file, then we have to touch the YAML file. Should we just make it the metadata block so it's one block for people to use? Because that'll work for all kinds of interviews, whether or not they're assembly line interviews.
we could We could do either. We could always do like a look for the metadata block. If what we would use from the metadata block is not there, look for interview metadata, because there is a valid reason we're using interview metadata. Like, or we started using it. I don't know how often we actually ended up using it, but like for nested interviews, like the metadata just doesn't work. Like we can't possibly get this sort of information we need. Which I guess, but that sort of does rely on like, oh, for nested interviews, the parent interview is like, or the umbrella interview is doing a lot of fairly complicated logic based on what the sub interview is, which I don't think we have any examples of us doing yet.
We don't have any examples. Yeah. Like I think it's fine because it doesn't hurt anything.
Yeah.
We never really
Yes.
use anything to do with interview metadata.
Mhm.
But we were thinking it might be tied to how we did our e-filing migration early on, but it did not end up being
Okay.
key there. I mean, it could
It's not the
easily
worst idea.
be used for that.
It could be, yeah. Now I'm thinking about it, some of the things that I have done could go in those, or they could have gone. It didn't. They were sort of. It might make it weirder and like more spooky action from a distance than it already is. But
So I kind of am leaning towards, I like your idea of having fallbacks. I do think, though, we're talking about information that's going to get published to the web on a front page.
yes.
So I suspect we're going to want to customize all of these interviews that we're going to publish no matter what. So I would say like probably the best default is to make them be to publish in the metadata block. And then like, because I kind of think that's a better place for it. When you're publishing the interview on your website, you know just one interview that you're going to try to describe, right? Even if it has 7 other documents inside it, that doesn't matter.
That's a good point.
We need to like fine tune a couple of things. Like if we want to show the original URL or the original form it automates,
Mhm.
that obviously needs to be a list. And we probably want to have a descriptive name and a URL, not just the thing.
Yes. Yeah.
So I can share my screen. Show that again.
Oh, sorry. Yeah.
Oh no, I forgot you were sharing. It's okay. But yeah. Description probably can get away with just using.
Yes. Yeah.
Do we think it makes sense to have other kinds of information?
I think the jurisdiction still makes sense, especially if we're considering this the first step of maybe national hosting.
E.court forms online and stuff, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
Whatever. And we could just be like a central repository. Hey, here's a bare bone site. We're not claiming to be the authoritative place for this, but here's a place to see a bunch of DocAssemble interviews that do different things.
Yep. That feels like
Just try like, so let's go to like one, like Washington Law Health. Other states have a lot of information before you get to the form.
yeah, that's a good point. I'm gonna pull up the layout. While you're doing that, I'm gonna look at layouts because I know the layout has a lot of good information about like each thing.
And Texas, they were saying they who was that Texas? They were saying they try to hide the form from people, so they don't find it on its own. Someone said that. It might have been Texas.
Yeah.
So how does it work? That's general. what forms will I get?
That would be
That's good to have.
the list of PDFs generated, I guess, or the sub-documents inside of it. Probably the
This
PDFs,
makes me
actually.
think you're right about going back to like parsing out. Well, I guess it's not a big ask to tell someone when they're working on the metadata of the interview to list every form it can generate, because that's different from the original forms. Because here they've
Yes,
listed
yeah.
the instructions page, for example.
Yes, yeah, I think that would be that
And
wouldn't
they
be
just
too
say
hard to
and
do.
other forms if needed. But
Mhm.
so these are like the qualification questions.
Yeah, that's pretty
You start and learn.
useful, but that is pretty high level. Or heavyweight.
These all seem like useful things, but they don't really fit how we'd been envisioning Corp Forms Online to date, where it's just an index of forms and there's like several are listed on the page.
Mhm. I guess that's a good point. Like, yeah, if a lot of this logic is already in the interview,
Well,
like,
it is, but it's also like, I do trust the states that have done this, that we had limits for what we could do. So our reason for saying it's not on a separate page before you start the interview isn't necessarily fully justified. Like this is repeated when you start the interview.
it is. Yeah, there's nothing back that being repeated probably.
Well, this actually is, never mind. This is like learn more who can get a protection order. This is repeated.
Mhm.
And some of the like, what do I need before I start is repeated.
Mhm.
But it's not exactly the same as this page. I say this, because I worked on this one, that's why I pull it up. But they have a lot.
Oh, fair. Yeah, you already know it's already in here. I mean, yeah, fair. I pulled up the appearance from Vallejo, so
Trying to remember. They revised it after I worked on it though, because they just combined the
yeah, it's fair.
two of the interviews got combined. Okay, it's terrible.
Yeah, I have not looked at a hot dogs interview in so long. Oh no.
So they've changed this. This says safety planning, but it used to say, can I get a protection order?
Mm.
Okay. All right. It's interesting. I can see why they changed it, because a lot of the can I get this order was really tied at whether you can usually get one kind of restraining order.
Mhm.
Although I don't know. It's interesting. I guess they simplified it. They're not screening people out. Let's try this. Maybe they're just actually asking the names. Okay, so this is the place where there's the screening. The point is, I guess, like, yeah, some of it's built into the interview. Some of it is tied to general information that might help you not start the interview at all. Like, you kind of have to have differing levels of triage that take place, right? Like, if you start with all the information on the landing page and nothing on the interview itself, then you don't know how people shared the link. They might have gotten it shared from a source that didn't have the landing page originally in it. So you want to have some screening there. But if you put too much screening in the interview, no. Question is, do we want more screening information on front and more context? It'll help with discovery.
Yeah. It does help with discovery. I do think that's also a, like, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, you want to show me
some of the feedback. Oh, sure, yeah. I was gonna say, and some of the feedback I know we've gotten on our stuff, and also with the maybe some of the Leo stuff, is that people will generally just use the interview to figure out more about the process, which is like, if they weren't like super sure if they were going to file something, they'll just go through the interview halfway and see if they do qualify for something, which is sort of, if they really wanted to, they could have, if all of this was like on the front page, they could have gone through and read all the front page stuff without having to go through the full form. But yeah, I'm not sure.
That makes a lot of sense, because that's what I would do too. I would not try to read. I never read all the documentation before I get started with something.
Yeah. So Aleo's has, for like the appearance, it has mostly most of the other stuff. It's not as like collapsible or as Washington's was. The only other thing was completion estimate time, which I think is not automated. I think that's just Matt going through and timing it himself, I think, a bit.
For me, I just use a heuristic that sounds like, does it sound like it's one that will encourage people to finish the form and not encourage them to take longer than expected?
For sure, yeah. This one's specifically like subject matter specific to this appearance of like, hey, you might need something else. You need to be involved in a court case. You can use it if you're a plaintiff or petitioner. And it also has the what do you need first. And it also has the documents you create. Nothing too different, but
okay. The documents this will create feels like a really useful thing for us to add, and we are really inconsistent about it. And does that, let me look at it again. Doesn't say instructions. Oh, that's how to file an appearance. I guess that is the instructions.
I do believe that is the instructions.
Yeah. And obviously we could get that by looking to see if there's an attachment block and pulling in that information. But I think it's okay to, that's not really easy to do, because generally that's a separate file, or very often it's a separate file if there's more than one document that produces. And then it's okay to have people update it in two places, I think, especially if it's all in the same file. What do you think? I think it is, personally, but I don't know if my question makes sense.
No, I think it makes sense. I think it's not too bad to have it updated on someplace. Or sorry. I don't think it's too bad to ask for people to update two separate places, but like, I don't know if people would do it, or like if they don't do it, is there an easy way for them to check that they didn't do it? And I guess maybe it's a bigger issue, or it's more noticeable if we actually start surfacing it in the metadata, because I feel like that's part of the issue of why metadata hasn't been updated, is it's not super used, or it's not used that much by everyone or by anything else. And so if it is like a thing that affects, oh yeah, like this affects how it shows up on the website, people will actually go through and update it. But
oh, that's a really important one, and we can calculate it automatically, I guess. But update, last update.
oh yeah, sorry, I didn't even think about that.
That needs to go on the website, but it doesn't necessarily have to be stored in the metadata of the interview file. Question is like, how do we get it? I guess we put it in the GitHub. So maybe the right thing to do is to say GitHub URL for the repo, and then automatically get the last date of the update from there. If we feel okay about that as being, because it is distinct from the date of the last installed version on the server,
Yeah,
but it's I mean, there's in DocAssemble, you can see the version number. That's an API query we could run. What's the version number with this package?
that's true.
Play
That would
that,
be
it's
pretty
not the
good.
same as a date.
To be honest, I might put a pull request in to get that info in the list, because that feels like it'd be exactly what you'd want in a list.
Yeah,
But
well, it's different because list is a list of YAMLs, not a list of packages.
I see. Okay. Well, even then, it's not like it's slightly different, but every YAML is still tied to the version. It's not like there's a YAML without a version.
That's true. Yeah, it has to be somewhere. And I don't think you can use list to point to anything other than DocAssemble installed packages on the server. Well, it can be, doesn't have to be installed, it can be a playground package, I guess. That's where I suppose the update date would break down, or the version number would break down, but we could have a synthetic version number for that situation.
But you can use dispatch to point to playgrounds.
You can use dispatch to point to a playground because they're in a artificially created package.
Okay, I didn't realize you could do that.
Yeah, you just point the package name docassemble.playground1.
Okay.
That's a package.
Yeah, that's fair.
From Python's point of view too.
They do typically still have versions, but you're right that the version will mean much less.
What are the versions that you're thinking of? Oh, I
Well-
suppose if it's a saved package, that's different. I'm not talking about someone creating a package in the Playground editor and saving it. Oh, they can do that. That's
What are we talking about then?
to do.
Um,
The Playground is a package, even separate from you going into the packages menu and creating a package from there.
Yes. But that playground has a version, right? Like as in
No,
there's a docassemble dot my package dot underscore init, and in that underscore init there is a version equals some string, right? It's going to be like 0.0.1 by default, but the version exists.
I'll show you what I mean. I think you might be right, but I don't know any way to control the version that I'm considering. So if I go here into folders,
Yep.
just
Packages. Yes.
I can have any number of packages there. They all live in one playground. But there is also a playground package that's automatically created and does not have anything to do with these packages here that I make and edit from the packages menu.
I didn't even realize you could have multiple of these.
Oh yeah, you
What?
have like 2 packages in one playground if you want. And that's what I've been doing. There's not going to be any FERPA data in here, so I don't think there's names. Like,
That doesn't.
grading. And well, I'll stop the live share, honestly.
Yeah, it's fair. We're